The rest now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Fiegley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lee. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for listening to our show, whether it's on the internet, the Biggs Radio, 92.7, 1310, Facebook, or YouTube. Well, thank you for supporting us each week. We have our superstar panel with us today, Attorney Milton Grimes and Attorney Vanita Banks. But we start on sad notes today. For the last week, I've been watching just other destruction to Hurricane Milton and this devastating it's caused. And so big prayers to all the folks that are homeless, injured, dead, displaced, heartbroken, or otherwise. We recognize that this is a really huge disaster. And we see that, thank God, we have competent leadership in the federal government. They're doing everything possible to save lives and to try to make people whole. And I would thank the Biden administration. I see that for food vouchers are immediately giving away $750 to people to replace food. And that's a good start. And so I want to make this clear that we're really saddened by this event. Voting, of course, has already started in the middle of these disasters. And so just a special shout out to all those victims that listen to us down in Georgia and Florida, places like that. So big prayers. Counselors, have you been following the disaster and seeing how devastating an effect it's had on our country?
Vanita?
Yes, absolutely. It's just been devastating. These back-to-back hurricanes. I just don't know how much our people across this nation can take. It's just been devastatingly brutal. And it's just key and important that all political leaders and others across our nation, that they articulate truth regarding what FEMA is doing, and so many first responders and others who have been mobilized in North Carolina and Florida to help our people that had been trying to recover from Helene and then followed by Milton. It's just so imperative that all of our leaders, this is a nonpartisan issue, and that all of our leaders ensure that they are publicizing and speaking truth regarding all the national, state, and local rescue and support efforts that are taking place.
Well, what it has brought out, I've been busy as hell, y'all, I'm sorry, but I saw that he, in the past, wouldn't help a particular state. I think it was, I can't recall the state, because they had a Democratic government or governor. He is not being truthful about what the government is doing in helping the state who needs help now with Helene and that other hurricane. I don't like to call the name of it because
Milton.
I would say the name is something else. A cousin of mine called me a couple of days ago and said, "Would you call it off? Cuz, can't you call it off?" I said, "Oh, I don't have that power." But hate to mention Trump. Again, he can't be honest and sincere and show care for the people in a moment of crisis, which discloses again his own selfish concern about everything. So Yeah, it's devastating. There's not much you can do but hope for the best for people in this situation, and that's what I guess I'm doing. But it's tough to get back-to-back situations like that, I'm sure, for people. And like you said earlier, before we started the program, a lot of people can't afford insurance for this particular type of occurrence. And so,
yeah, Milton, I looked at the FEMA manual. It's like 440 pages, and I was looking at the cost of the insurance, and I wasn't shocked, but it's very expensive insurance. I was calculating a $300,000 house with your contents and structure insurance would cost about $4,500 a year. I'm thinking, wow, that's almost like $400 a month that tacked onto your mortgage, your taxes, and insurance. And I thought that was incredibly expensive. And you may only need that once in every 10 years,
right.
And so, but the second thing that was horrifying was the reaction of some of these right-wing, the nutcase Republican, Marjorie Taylor Greene, that put out information that somehow liberal people call weather disasters. I mean, it's got to be these political things getting dumber and dumber. And I was watching the political discourse this week when they were talking about what Trump did for America. And Obama set him straight by saying that he took over an economy that we had 76 consecutive months of job growth, and he screwed it up, and so they gave him credit for things that he didn't do. And one of the things that was shocking, well, I guess it shouldn't be shocking, the White House staff was saying that this idiot, when he was president, tried to only give disaster relief to Republican district. And the staff had to say, wait a second, you have Republican voters in all these areas that you're trying to exclude benefits, so this is a disaster. So now we have this deluge of misinformation, and the average citizen don't know what to believe anymore. And because I noticed that you see on the internet these stories, and these stories that I see just are so crazy. Milton, Vanita. I mean, it populates on the internet, it gets shared, and all of a sudden everybody thinks it's true. And it goes from story to lie to lie to lie, and it just won't stop. And unfortunately, a lot of people get their news from these sites that they see,
right.
I remember talking to some of my Republican friends who were out playing golf, and smart young man, he was saying he doesn't trust the news media. Of course, he's a Trump voter when he says that, right? Mm-hmm. And then he goes down this dialogue. I said, well, where do you get your news from? I said, you can't get it from any network. Would you get it from the entertainment station called Fox? I mean, so this misinformation is driving further division. So now the political campaigns, as we see, one is totally ran into a negative type process, demonizing citizen, and running a straight racist campaign now. And then they get involved in disaster relief somehow, some way. When people in their most vulnerable time of need, they're getting fed misinformation. So, and I'm sorry, what'd you say?
It's something about that indoctrination program that they put down on people that, in my observation, in my reading, I read this book not long ago about QAnon, and it's called The Quiet Damage or something. I think that's the title. I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly, but I read it a couple of months ago. And what came out of that is a lot of people who listen to this repeated, who get caught up in this lie and listen to this repeated. It's almost like watching a reel over and over again, or a movie over and over again. They get so indoctrinated, they come out of that angry, and you're not able to talk with them and share your ideas in a rational discussion. And I was at the store, 7-Eleven or some store, a couple of days ago, and I happened to say something to this brother standing there, and I said, oh yeah, my lady told me, don't buy this tequila because Johnson, the big guy, that the brother that plays in the super movies, Dwayne Johnson is a Trump supporter. And he backed up and he said, well, some people, but he turned angry with me right away because I had said, my lady said, this guy's a Trump supporter. But I've noticed that to get into a discussion with someone who's a Trump supporter, they seem to get angry about this difference right away. I don't know if any of you have noticed that when you talk to his supporters, but the ones that seem to be less informed, I guess I'm concluding, it's almost like an intoxication with them or something, that they believe what they have heard and there's nothing else to be talked about.
Wow.
I get that sense, and thank you for that, Milton, because you just articulated the sense that I get when I'm reading various social media feeds, and there is a back and forth dialogue, in the comments section regarding, a particular issue or event that may have happened. And one person may make a point, and then a former president's supporter response would come across, to your point, so angry.
Right.
They would just retreat down to kind of like the lowest base of response.
Right.
You idiot. You know what I'm saying? Almost dehumanizing. And so sometimes I use the word radicalization of people through social media.
Yeah, that's what I read through this book. That was the end result of this book I read. Like, the majority of the people were like, they take themselves away from their family and from their loved ones, their kids, or their kids from their parents. And it's like, I'm over here in isolationville. And if you're not here, something is wrong with you, and I will not associate with you, and I will not talk to you. And it's just a strange human behavior.
Wow. Let me go to the line. We'll take a caller. Wait a second. Imhotep, you had a question or comment for us today, sir?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Brother Nate, Attorney Banks, Attorney Grams. Thank you for taking my call. Be brief. A couple decisions in the last week and a half that maybe I don't know if you covered, but could be note of. Number one, the Supreme Court refusing to hear Elon Musk challenge to turning over those tweets from January about Trump tweeting from about January 6th. I think John Roberts, they said, was the linchpin behind that. Some say John Roberts is growing very weary of former President Donald Trump. So thought that was a victory. Number two, the appeals court in the parole board, in Texas denied former police officer Amber Geiger her parole. If people are not familiar, Miss Amber Geiger was the Dallas police officer that stated she went into the wrong apartment and unalived Brother Bolton Jean in his own apartment singing and dancing. And she just got 10 years for being convicted of murder, which is unheard of. But the parole board did deny her parole, so she can't come up again until I think October of 2026. That will put her probably close to 8 years of that term. Bolton Jean's mother expressed dismay with just getting the 10-year sentence, but she expressed gratitude that the parole board did not let her out early. So that was a victory there. Another victory was the Supreme Court of South Carolina rejected a bid by charter schools to delve into the public money from the state. I watched the debate on YouTube. They have a couple black judges on it. One black judge I know I saw on the South Carolina Supreme Court, and they were lambasting the private school entities, lawyer. And South Carolina's constitution is very strict that the superintendent and the public monies for school that comes into the general fund are strictly to be used for public school. They do not allow Catholics or private schools to get into that. So I thought that was a victory. I wish more states would adopt what South Carolina Supreme Court decided there, and that does help public school and definitely our students, especially in a place like South Carolina. It was riveting testimony, riveting back and forth. If you get a chance, go listen to that. But the logic from those justices was very on point, and they strictly told them you can't have any of this public money. So I want to throw it out there. I know we have a lot of other stuff going on. And your last thing about your misinformation, I did listen to former President Barack Obama's speech, and I did listen to Magic Johnson last week targeting black men. But I read from political journalist and commentator Bill Kristol yesterday. And Bill Kristol said a few things that former President Obama left out is not black men or black people, period. That's the problem. It's white men and white women. It's always been that way. If people don't understand, go look up who Bill Kristol is. He's a conservative. He's not a Democrat by no means, but yet he is supporting Kamala Harris because he abhors former President Trump.
Hey, I'm going to take one quick question, though. Mm-hmm. One quick question that's been bugging me. One of the polls showed that 25% of African-American men were supporting Trump and only like 1% of African-American females, something like that. Were that misinformation led this? I don't know 25% of African Americans that are supporting Trump, but this misinformation, because MAGA movement is really a very racist claim in the sense that Make America Great has to do, in my mind, the fact that it was great. What was great about slavery and segregation? There was nothing, in my mind, great about that oppression of minority. And it seemed like to me when they say Make America Great Again, that's what they're talking about. You know, because exactly. There's no other time in history that, you know, in terms of African America, that we have rights until after the Civil Rights Act in the 60s. So there was nothing great about segregation or Jim Crow laws and things like that. But somehow a political party has embraced that notion. And I even see some blacks dumb enough to embrace that, not really knowing the historical context this came from.
Not knowing the historical context, we saw a video last week. I think Trump was in Pennsylvania, and a black MAGA supporter was jumped on and beat up by white MAGA supporters. It's a very ugly video. I mean, he was getting pummeled with MAGA gear on. So they don't look at you, to the Larrys and whoever else. They don't look at you the same. They beat this man to a pulp, and he's wearing red MAGA just like them. It didn't matter. They saw black. But I want to know from you all, there has to be something legal. I know Jack Smith. Oh, that was another decision. I think Trump aboard the fact of refiling of Jack Smith, and that the Supreme Court basically told him no, because Jack Smith now had that doorway that they allowed when they gave that decision back in, I think it was May or June, something like that, or April. So Jack Smith had that doorway. Those new charges have come. But that's the question I have. Even for those that may support him, some polls, Roland Martin and used black pollsters, and they're saying maybe it's at 18%, could be at 20%. But even let's say it's 2 out of 10. I've asked them, give me one logical reason or one logical points of interest that would say to support Donald Trump. Because being from Gary and being a person who attended the former late Don Barton's financial speeches and things like that. People who don't know who Don Barton is. Don Barton was the former businessman from Detroit. He owned the Majestic. The Trump and Majestic Casino was the first casino that opened up in Gary, where he owned the Majestic and Trump had the Trump. And Don Barton also owned Fitzgerald's in Memphis and Fitzgerald's in Vegas. Very, very prominent businessman, good brother. And when Trump filed bankruptcy on the Trump Casino in Gary, Don Barton decided that he would go ahead and take it over. They went to federal court in Hammond in 2003. And Trump didn't want Don Barton to get control of the casino. And the federal judge, bankruptcy judge, went ahead and awarded the Trump Casino to Don Barton. And on the way out the door, according to close people from Gary, people I know back home in Gary, former President Trump called him the N-word on the way out the door on the steps, federal court, right there in Hammond. And Mr. Barton told him, "You're lucky these police are between us, because I would drag you up and down these steps." So we know him well. Trump lied about everything in Gary. He didn't build any hotels. He didn't build any homes. He didn't invest any money. Same thing he did in Atlantic City. So when I hear certain brothers or the few brothers talking, I'm like, no, you ain't talking to us, not from home, not from Gary, because he lied. And I was just in Chicago last Wednesday and Thursday, Attorney Banks, and crossing that bridge on Michigan Avenue and turn to the right and look and see that big Trump sign at that hotel. My grandson was like, "Is that Trump's building there? Ugh, what is he doing with a building here?" Even an 11-year-old whom I schooled don't like Trump, but that's just a slap in the face, even in Chicago, how he talks bad about Chicago, and yet this man's name is plastered on his building right at the bridge crossing the river, right on Michigan Avenue. It's just a quite anomaly there. So thank you for taking my call. Appreciate it. Yes.
Can I add into this, Nate, that I was disturbed by a couple of things in the past week. There was a report on, I think it was on C-SPAN, one of the, I forgot, but the senator has disclosed after 6 years of investigation that the Kavanaugh investigation was as weak as I thought it was at the time, when I was saying, why don't the FBI interview this person? Why don't the FBI talk to this high school person who said they was there? And it was just not satisfactory with me. It was disturbing that the FBI had not thoroughly investigated Kavanaugh. And now it's come out that the White House intervened in that investigation and ordered the FBI not to probe into witnesses who were precipient to the events that took place at that party. They didn't interview them. They didn't talk to them. And it came out that they hadn't been spoken to because they didn't think they were relevant. But now it has come out that the White House was controlling the FBI in the investigation of Kavanaugh. I don't think it necessarily put him over the top. I don't know how he got over the top by being confirmed as a Supreme Court justice, but it helped the White House stack that court. And that's what we want to go back to, with the White House being in control of a situation like that. Make America Great Again means going back. This psychiatrist friend of mine has some old posters up in his office advertising James Brown, the Flamingos, about 5 different beautiful Black groups that I used to go to the Howard Theater back in the 60s and the in the 60s to see. And on those posters, it's advertising these performances at 7:30 at the Palace. The colored show is at 10:30 at another location. I mean, that's what it says on there. Whites only on those. And when you see that thing, when you see it in print like that, it's like a slap. And that's what we want to go back to.
Well, we'll take Pierre. Pierre, you have a question or comment for us today, sir?
Oh, good afternoon, everybody, or good morning. Great show last week, Nate, with your guest that you had on. Very informative, and I shared that video because that was a great video. Yeah, you know, Imhotep said he talks bad about Chicago. He also talks bad about Detroit, and it looks like a lot of people in that city are going to vote for him. But in other legal news, I noticed that the Supreme Court refused to take R. Kelly's case.
I saw that.
So it looks like, it looks like his only hope now is a pardon, and I don't ever see that coming. He's going to be sitting in prison for probably till he's in his 80s. His attorney put together a great argument, though, when she talked about the law, and I guess their position was they prosecuted him past the statute of limitations for one particular law or something like that. But at any rate, they're not going to let him out. What I wanted to bring to you guys' attention, and maybe you guys can comment on it. There's a lot of Trump supporters on the job, and you got a lot of supervisors and managers that are Trump supporters out there. And, you know, Title VII law, in my opinion, right now, it's pretty much dead law, because what a lot of people don't understand, people listening to this show right now, and I know they don't understand it because they don't ever call into the show and talk about it. And that is these arbitration agreements that are buried in to your employment agreement when you take on a new job or when you get hired or whatever, and they're having you sign all these papers. One of those papers they're having people sign, Nate, is arbitration agreements. And so if you're just, unless it involves sex discrimination, or what I call the white woman clause, because if you're sexually harassed, you can still go to federal court, but otherwise you have to go through arbitration. And I know that's something important to you, Nate, because I know you know about that Uber Eats case where those people were in that car accident, and because of their agreement that they had with Uber Eats or something like that, when they were in that Uber, they're not going to get to take their case to court or something like that. Maybe you can elaborate on that. But people just don't understand how important these arbitration agreements affect our everyday lives. And with Trump in office and the Republicans in office, it's only going to get worse. So I wanted to bring that up to your attention, what you guys think about these arbitration agreements and the Arbitration Act. I think it needs to go away. And we got a better chance of making it go away under a Harris administration versus a Trump administration. But thank you for taking my call.
Well, he raised a lot of issues, Attorney Banks and Grimes, but you know, I've sued all the cars like Uber. What's the other ones?
Lyft,
Uber.
Lyft.
I've sued them successfully, and but normally it involves either they're a passenger in the car or they're passenger, the driver, the accident caused by a third party. So we've collected, and I've not had a case go adverse because of an arbitration clause as of yet. You know, I've seen it raised as a defense in our case, but it's not largely we've ignored it because you don't contract to be a victim of gross negligence, for example. So it's not been an issue in my cases thus far, but maybe Pierre may be right. I know that there was a New Jersey case on that, but you know, so far so good in my personal litigation. We've done maybe a dozen cases, you know, and we've recovered in all those cases. So I've not had a problem yet.
So you've successfully navigated around those arbitration clauses?
We've collected proceeds for our clients in all our Uber cases thus far.
Wow,
But
outstanding.
But see, I'm not sure what the trends are in the court cases because we sue everybody, and I keep a track of the ones that's directly on my desk at that time. So when I get another one, I'll take a look at it at that time. But right now, I think I resolved my last Uber case last month, and I don't think I have any pending, but I'd have to double check when I get back to the office.
do you find that there is I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. You said.
Do you find that there is an unusual amount of sexual offenses being committed by some of these drivers? I seem like I read something about that one time or another. These drivers taking women off into the back areas and molesting them or sexually harassing them.
I've heard about that. Go ahead, Pierre. What were you saying, sir, Pierre?
Well, with respect to what Milton just said, we just had a young lady killed about a month and a half ago here by a Uber driver, and he is real brutal, and that just happened here a month ago. So I don't know. I would assume the family's going to go after Uber for that. Uber's talking nice and everything. I doubt it even go to court. But yeah, that happened here a month ago. But the point I was making was, Nate, a lot of you personal injury attorney guys, you guys settle a lot of cases before they even get the court even gets to rule on something. They say, look, we're just going to settle this because we don't want to go to trial on this. So you may not have gotten, but I know if you go to court and on a Title VII case, and you work for an employer or that has these arbitration agreements in it, your case is going to get tossed out of court. And the same if you these contracts that we sign for these just about everything, you can't sue for a defective product if it kills you. You have to. Well, you can, but better believe there's an arbitration clause in there, and they're going to raise it as a defense.
Well, Pierre, on prox liability cases, we do a lot of those. We don't sue on the basics of they didn't comply with federal regulation. We sue, generally speaking, on advertisement liability. So if you watch all these drug manufacturers and things on TV, they'll say that this drug does X, Y, Z, and then they'll have a disclaimer, right? Well, the lawsuits that we're filing, we don't invoke the arbitration provisions and things like that because we're suing on advertisement liability. So you make critical omissions or representation, and so that was the basis of those lawsuits. And we've, you name the manufacturer. We sued a lot of different manufacturers over the years, but it's based on advertisement liability, except with heparin, for example. Pierre, remember back in 2008 when a bunch of babies died and got injured at Methodist Hospital? In that case, we sued both the hospital and the manufacturer, but the manufacturer based on the labeling liability, and it led to a federal law change that in neonatal units now, the medication has to be pink, for example, the labeling, so they don't give infants adult doses of medication in the neonatal unit at all hospitals across America. So the legal theories to get around that sometimes are far different than what people realize, and that's how we navigate those troubled waters.
Okay, well, I know you don't raise it, but I was saying the people that you sue, I'm quite sure that they raise it as a defense if it's in there. And a lot of times it's in there. And these arbitration agreements and clauses, they need to go away real fast. But
well, you're correct.
Taking my call.
Hey, Pierre, you're correct in the sense that if you sue a manufacturer based on a defective product alone, you'll probably lose that case on a summary judgment. But that's not in other words, the way that we sue, we have to develop lawsuits and pleadings to circumvent these draconian reasoning to get them thrown out. So in other words, strategically speaking, when we file a lawsuit, we have to see, okay, what's going on in that neck of the woods in litigation. Now, with our artificial intelligence, we could look at every case in the country to determine, well, how are they being defended and what works and what doesn't work. So the skill set of doing lawsuit has changed over the years since 40 years ago when I started doing this. And so we have to be able to navigate around those issues. Now, the problem you're right about is Title VII. Those cases in terms of race discrimination cases, particularly for African America, it's becoming almost impossible to win those cases now. Sex discrimination and age is okay, but race discrimination cases are almost impossible to win in the federal court system. Now,
our earlier callers referenced the Supreme Court case or the case that went to the Supreme Court involving the now social media platform X, formerly Twitter. This case arose out of a search warrant that was issued to the former Twitter platform. It was a search warrant with a non-disclosure agreement to obtain the Twitter account information of the former president. And so this case appealed up to the Supreme Court, argued that it violated the First Amendment to execute a non-disclosure order which prevented Twitter from advising the former president that the subpoena had been issued. And so the court did not explain its reasoning, and there was no noted dissent in the case. They just rejected the appeal. And this is in connection with election interference case that has been brought by Jack Smith over false statements made by the former president that resulted in an angry mob pillaging the U.S. Capitol on January 6th.
Well, that's a sad situation. You know, Attorney Banks and Grimes, that case really saddens me. We're seeing a U.S. Supreme Court engage in legal jujitsu to try to protect a single person. You know, I think that a lot of people enable terrorists like Hitler to rise to power and look at the devastation he caused. People ignore this abnormal conduct of a so-called leader, and when they do that, they empower these misdeeds and they justify misdeeds. It's just a terrible consequence to American democracy that you could completely ignore the rule of law, custom and tradition, and somehow the courts give them a pass because it does damage to the notion in our country that no person is above the law. And they're making a radical exception in my mind when I watch some of these decisions they're making. You know, when they were saying, we watched, everybody in Congress said that, I watched this famous speech by Mitch McConnell after the January 6th riot. And, you know, he voted not to impeach Trump at the time. It was, 57 or 58, they needed 60 votes to impeach and remove him from office. And they came relatively close. I don't remember the final vote tally, but here's what was critical. He gave this lengthy speech, and he said, he's not done yet. There's still civil and criminal remedies for what he had done, right? He said that. And then now we're seeing the Supreme Court, Milton and Vanita, essentially, they are doing things saying that the president is immune for things done in his official capacity. I'm thinking, how in the hell did we get from doing a presidential duty to trying to overthrow an election? I mean, to me, it's just insulting to even put the two in the same perspective, you know, that how does that become a presidential duty to try to kill people in the Capitol? I mean, it's insane. You know, I didn't see the connection. But moving on, the other issue, Council, is that early voting has already started. And, you know, in various states all across the country. And one thing I need to just talk about very quickly before we get into this topic. Locally, in Indiana, we have a public question. Has to do with whether or not the state superintendent of public instruction should have a vote on who succeed in terms of crisis as the leader of the government. That question should be answered no, do not change current law. It's a bad idea. And also, we have on the ballot are 3 very good Indiana Supreme Court judges. I'm voting yes, we should retain all 3. And then we have some Superior Court judges that I think are really doing a great job. They have like 30 on the ballot, but there's some I make sure you vote yes to confirm: Linda Brown, John Chavis, Charnette Garner, Clayton Graham. They're very good judges, African-American judges. So make sure you vote to confirm these judges. And I know you don't get a chance to talk to them, but I do, and they're doing an outstanding job. And also for the people who live in Pike Township, my good friend Tony Wolfson is nonpartisan election for Pike School Board. Make sure you vote for her. But having said that, Milton, in your city, in LA, you have your prosecutor is underwater there.
Yep, under some deep water. And it seems as though the right has done a good job at putting him down and advertising. And I can't explain it any more than that his own office, his deputies were strongly against him from the beginning. And his policies were fought by the judges when it came to filing priors and 3 strikes and enhancements for weapon use or just weapon possession or being associated with the co-defendant who had a weapon. A lot of things that he tried to change, his deputies went against, because one of the things is they couldn't get as much time or as serious of a conviction for the crime. And they considered his policies to be too liberal, and the cause for the rise or the cause for the crime rate that we had, whether it was a rise or not. So, yeah, Nathaniel, looks like we're going to, I hate to say we're going to lose him because I don't want to forecast the future. It's not decided yet, but he does not look good.
Yeah, my concern though, Vanita and Milton, is that you had so much corruption there in your police and sheriff department there in LA County. Could you try again?
Based on the polls, it does not look good. What's wrong? Can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you loud and clear. Yes, go ahead.
I got a recording saying you couldn't get that. Try again.
Yeah. Hey, but Milton, my concern though is that it seemed like he was trying to hold police officer accountable for misconduct also. Seemed like that was not a favorite thing to do. And I don't get that. I don't see why citizens don't think that's a good idea.
Because the police officers have done a good job at campaigning against that. Nathaniel, they're one of the strongest unions or groups in the country, definitely in California, and they contribute a lot of money to these elections, millions of dollars they contribute. And so that's something that they don't approve of and don't like, so they fought against it, and they have a representative, the Houch, however you pronounce his name, who represents their interests. So best I can say it. Money talks.
Yeah, but why? Well, this part I don't understand. The city, Storm York case, Rodney King, they saw what happened when you give law enforcement officials too much power. We understand that it's critical to have law enforcement officials to protect people from crime and things like that. On the other hand, like anyone else, no person above the law, if they themselves violate the law, they themselves should also be held accountable. We understand that. Why wouldn't the ordinary citizen, like in the LA, not look back at the historical nature of how much corruption you had in your law enforcement community and say, maybe it's a good thing that we keep a guy like this in place and get rid of these particular abusive police officers.
Because people go for the propaganda when it's repeatedly shown, just like Puffy Coins. I don't necessarily agree with what he's accused of, but I do have a concern that he will not be given a fair trial based upon the repeated rolling of the film of him fighting with his girlfriend that he's selling a $30 million case with. That's going to turn people against him. That's going to present a biased potential jury pool, or in some cases, a voting pool when it comes time to have a trial or to vote. Here you have them repeatedly showing that Gascon has set in place policies that free criminals, that causes harm, that increases crime, and they repeatedly show this real. And the public is reacting and responding to what's being shown them, whether it's true or not. That's what they're reacting to. So it's not complex to me. It's just the obvious. People are misinformed, and they go with it.
I didn't like the ethics, Milton. You talk of Sean Combs. You know, I didn't like the ethics of what the prosecutor did in that case. Okay. In a nutshell, when I looked at the indictment, it was very flimsy, but it appeared to be consensual sexual conduct by an adult woman, and they were advertising to encourage more people to come forward and make claims whether they have merits or not. So he's actually did a marketing campaign to promote alleged criminality. And then that insult to injury, you keep a person in jail pre-trial for a sex offense. We're not talking about rape, manslaughter, murder. We're talking about what they look like, prostitution. I don't get that. You know, in some states, some of this conduct they're alleging is legal. And I was concerned about the manner in which they're handling, even though maybe he did some bad things, but I don't know.
Well, it's the same. Yeah, but it's the way the media works when people want to use it to that result, Nate. Like against Gascon, I think the man. I agree with most of what he says. I think that the prisons are overcrowded because they over-prosecute, especially minority people. And he has tried to put into place some policies to protect from that. But the majority is saying, no, lock them up, lock them up. That's just what I feel and see.
Okay, Carl, you have a question or comment for us today?
Probably a comment more so. Good morning, good afternoon, good morning to everyone. So I want to touch on the polling situation and the idea that money buys votes. Well, my perception is I ran a campaign in Texas a couple of years back, and I also have worked on and volunteered for several campaigns in Texas over the last 10 years. And so my view is that money actually does not buy voters. But what they do, how campaigns are won or lost is who drives the people to the polls. If you can't get your people to the poll, it does not matter how much money you have. One thing that the Republicans do consistently, they don't have to beg their constituents and their supporters to go to the polls. They just go. They're going to be there. So they don't have to spend a lot of money getting them to go out. We do. We have to spend a lot of money to turn people out, to get them to go to the polls. So that's what the money really does. It doesn't really buy voters. It's just an apparatus to make sure that your constituents turn out to vote. Unfortunately, many Democrats don't feel and they need to vote. They just don't. And I don't know how you overcome that. I think they're doing a better job this time around, Kamala Harris and her team, but that's the goal. And that's why right now everybody is talking about it isn't necessarily going to be the advertisement. It's the ground game. It's the field operators. They got to make these people want to get up and go vote and do it early if they can, but definitely do it November 5th. So that's what the money is good for, to drive your voters to the polls. The other thing I would say about polls as, I'll give you an example. Don't trust polls unless you know what methodology the pollster used, what sample pool they use. Like, for instance, when they talk about likely voters, that is not necessarily people who voted before, who had an opportunity and voted before. Those are people that are saying they're going to vote. The better question would be, did you vote in the last few elections? Well, first ask them, are you going to vote? And if they say yes, or maybe, then you get rid of those maybe people and keep the yes people. Then the next question should be, did you vote in the last 2 elections? And if they say no, then you don't sample those people, because they're probably not going to vote this election. You want to capture the people who are most likely going to vote, not just likely going to vote. So when you do that, you're basically allowing the sample pool to get contaminated with people who will never vote. But you're asking them their opinion on a particular election, which will have no impact because they're probably not going to vote. So those are some ways that polls can be manipulated. Also, I know a lot of people, and I have not found one person that I knew or family members that has been polled. That's weird. So where are you going to get the sample pool that you say is likely to vote? And unless you know that, all that information behind the polling apparatus, that you're going to have problems with polls. These polls are close, but I feel like there's also a group that they're missing in these polls because they go to the same old people. There are I don't know how many millions of people who are eligible to vote now that weren't eligible in 2016 or 2020 or 2022 who are going to show up because their future depends on it. The only thing I could say, if Kamala does not win by a landslide, is because of racism and sexism. So that's my opinion, and I'm taking that to the bank. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Renee. Excellent insight.
Yeah, what's a lot of information.
To get me to do something, when I say that, I got to be interested in what you want me to do. It seems that many minority people or people that, and people that are less affluent feel that this structure called the government does not affect their lives to any degree that warrants their moving on a particular Tuesday to go cast a vote. I recall hearing these 3 young men in Philadelphia talk, these 3 Black men who kind of, one was in a union and they had different work jobs, but I remember the joint agreement or statement was that the last 3 or 4 presidents has not affected their lives. So what's the need of me worrying and getting involved in all this excitement and going to vote when it doesn't affect me? No matter who's president, my life is going to be the same. I got to go to work and got to pay my rent and I got to buy a used car and my kids don't go to private school. So it doesn't affect me. But for middle class and above, it could make a difference in what some of these laws are. So people are just responding and reacting to what affect them is how I look at it. And unless we can help people see that some of these, like some of the things that are said in 2025 may affect them, they're not going to be that interested in coming out on a rainy day or going out in the cold or being mixed up, losing a day from work maybe or a couple of hours to go vote. I don't know how we change that attitude, but that's what I see here. So yeah, we don't have the people voting as much that need to be voting, but I don't know how to change it. I don't know how to change some of the attitude of some of these young men that I talk to who stiffen up and get kind of aggressive when you talk against Trump, because Trump to them represent, you know, a man's freedom, a manhood. That's what he represents.
Vanita, your thoughts on that issue?
Well, I think that Milton stated it well. And the challenge is over the next 20 or so days is for the Harris Walz ticket to clearly articulate, and she's crisscrossing the country speaking with African American and diverse communities. I think she'll be in Detroit hosting a call-in town hall meeting with Charlemagne the God. Now that's a different conversation in terms of, you know, the impact that Charlemagne has on voters, but he has a really huge constituency. So the challenge is to persuade or advocate how this opportunity economy that that Vice President Harris is speaking about, how that will impact the lives of our people, Milton, in a way that will potentially persuade them that their life may be changed in a positive way.
Well, here's something to answer that question, Milton, Vanita. Two things. The homeowners deduction and tax credit that is in the Harris campaign. A tax credit is money that you actually get. $6,000 a year tax credit is being proposed. That means that you get $500 per month for having a child, and that basically will help get a lot of children out of poverty. The tax rule for new home buyers, there's a 3 million at least shortage of home, particularly in our neighborhoods and community for African-American home ownership. There's going to be federal bill that they're trying to pass to help you be able to buy a home, to assist you. A lot of us don't have the money for a down payment to buy our home. And right now, in all our cities, apartment rents are just too high. And so you live from paycheck to paycheck, and all you're trying to do is pay bills. Well, help us on the way.
$25,000 deduction for small businesses. That's going to be very, very helpful to our African-American and African-American entrepreneurs across this country.
Yes. So thank you, everyone. And thank you very much, Milton, Vanita. That was an excellent closing point. And next week, we'll be talking once again. Don't forget, go out and vote early, because your future may depend on it. Democracy is at stake on this election. Take care, everyone. Have a blessed day and have a great Saturday and this weekend.
Have a great day.
Hey, guys.